Hey everyone, it's Alex and welcome to the Decks of the Week. We're talking about 10 unique decks today. Let's get started. We're getting right into it here with Rocks, Hawks, and Locs. You must be familiar with the Rocks and Hawks style deck list, and this is a new version of that exact list, and we're running Legion. Legion is the major splash that is making waves in the meta right now, and this is by far one of the absolute best decks in Marvel Snap. This is not clickbait, legit. This is the one in the Marvel Snap Conquerors event. This was the one that we all turned to when the variant was on the line and we had to get those dubs for the community. This was the deck. Now, there is a different variation of the deck. This happens to be the one that I was running. However, most people are actually taking out Chavez and adding Luke Cage instead to give you some play against the High Evolutionary. Now, I preferred the Chavez version because getting Zabu on turn 2 or 3 is so valuable in this deck, and the increased chance percentage-wise in Conquest over, an entire Infinity Conquest makes a huge difference. I prefer Chavez, the meta prefers this, but ultimately it's up to you. I just want to show you guys both versions, but ultimately it's an amazing deck. It gives you a ton of versatility, and it's without question one of the absolute best in the meta. Deck number 2 this week is Thanos Lockdown. Thanos continues to be one of the absolute top shells of the meta. I mean, it's just pretty simply the stones are just insane. The stones are insane. They do way too much. And it's the Time Stone specifically that is kind of the core component of this deck. You got Time Stone, you got Psylocke, and the idea here is you want to play one of these 5-drops as early as possible. Generally speaking, you want to play a 5-drop on turn 4. You want to sneak out a Professor X, and if you whiff on it, you have the Jeff to kind of make up for it. You also have things like the Soul Stone, which trade favorably for you in the Professor X location. You have the Lockdown of Spider-Man. You have the Reach of Iron Lad. Ultimately, this deck just does exactly what it has to do. It's a very aggressive Thanos deck that's all about ramping energy and getting some extreme power on the board as early as possible. Naut Evolution is by far one of the hottest risers into the current meta. From a win rate perspective, it's near the top, and it's only gaining in popularity as people realize that this is an absolutely fantastic deck. It's running excellent 1-drops with Sunspot and Nebula, protected of course by armor, because if you don't have armor, you're going to get munched on by that Killmonger. Sunspot has natural synergy with something like a magic. You generate a turn 7 with Limbo. You skip turn 6 into She-Hulk and Infinite on turn 7 with the 7 energy you're provided. And you get some protection from Leech, because what Leech does is if they're holding a Storm in their hand and you play Leech on turn 5, when you go into turn 6, that Storm can no longer storm the Limbo because it doesn't have an ability anymore. So Leech is a really impactful here with these decks. It sets up an opportunity for you to really take advantage of your She-Hulk and Infinite. I really like the inclusion of Leech. This is the first time Leech has really made a comeback in the meta, but regardless, I love this deck. I think this deck is one of the best out there from a win rate perspective. And if you want to experiment with skipping turn 6 again with the She-Hulk and the She-Hulk and the Infinite play, this is the deck that's going to do it for you. If you're looking for something tried, tested, and true, look no further than the Sauron Shuri deck. This deck is one of the most consistent in the game right now. I feel like I've been talking about it nonstop, but it's true. This is a consistent deck. It has a very straightforward play pattern, and it's good. It's just good. Like, I don't know what else to say. The only disadvantage is that it doesn't win points by surprise. Like, this deck does not take your opponents by surprise. When they see the Red Skull come down at 28 power, they're like, okay, here comes the Taskmaster, whatever. They get it, right? So it's very rare that you're getting them for 8 cubes. But honestly, the matchup spread with this deck is fantastic. It just performs. It's a very consistent deck, and if that's what you're looking for, this is what you want to play. Bolt and Stature, I gotta tell you, it's a great deck with a great win rate, and its popularity is actually kind of on the rise. This is a deck that became very popular a couple months ago, then the nerf to Stature and Black Bolt kind of brought some of the heat down off it, but really, it was only 2 power off the Miracle turn 6. Ultimately, this deck still performs. You have great cards like Jeff. When you move Jeff, you get the 1-cost Spider-Man Morales, and then that allows you, if you play a Black Bolt on turn 5, to basically play Stature, Morales, and one of the 4-drops as well. So you get a ton of utility, and if Zabu's on the board, you can actually do Rockslide Darkhawk, you can do Shang-Chi Darkhawk. You have all these different finishers, and of course you also have the Nebula, which is one of the strongest 1-drops in the game. Ultimately, this deck does perform very well. If you don't have Jeff, Nightcrawler is a good fit here because it allows you to move Nightcrawler to basically get the turn 6 Spider-Man Morales at 1 cost, which is exactly what you want. You want to move Jeff on turn 5, for instance, because that's how you play Spider-Man Morales. You can also, if Zabu's on the board, you can play Polaris on turn 3, and then on turn 4, do something like a Rock Slide and a Morales because it's going to be a 1 cost. Regardless, it's a very flexible deck. It goes extremely vertical, and overall, it's a damn good deck in the meta. If you're feeling a little destructive and you want to put points on the board, Nimrod Destroyer is an excellent option. I mean, it's just crazy what this deck can do. It can go vertical with the Destroyer, but most importantly, it goes very wide, very fast, and the math can be difficult for your opponent, so you're often able to steal some 8-cube games because, like, listen, you Shuri turn 4, you Nimrod turn 5, that's a 12-power Nimrod. You got options. You could play Destroyer and you got a big Destroyer and Nimrod's bouncing everywhere. You could actually Venom and Deathlock. You Venom the Nimrod lane. Venom basically absorbs the power of the Shuri Nimrod. It's huge. The Nimrods bounce and then Deathlock comes down as well. Pops the Nimrods again. Like, it's crazy what this deck does. The turn 6 play has multiple win conditions, and it's crazy just how effective it is at being flexible to win you cubes in Conquest. I get asked all the time about my absolute favorite archetype in Marvel Snap, and that's Silver Surfer. Now, one thing I want to say before we dive into Silver Surfer is that if you find this content helpful, and if you like these types of videos, perhaps consider subscribing. The only reason why I say this, I don't try to say this in all my videos, but is because YouTube's weird, and subscribing simply just helps me get my videos to you. And if you find this information helpful, then subscribe. It just helps you see the videos in the future. That's all, and I do appreciate your support, honestly. It does legitimately mean the world to me. Lockdown Surfer. Now, Surfer is an interesting spot right now because you have Negative Surfer, which is super popular. We've featured it in tons of videos before. So why aren't I talking about Negative Surfer? Why are we talking about Lockdown Surfer? It's because I think this deck's better, and the data says this deck's better. The win rate on this deck is higher than the Negative Surfer one. For a while, Negative Surfer was doing okay because people weren't playing against Surfer, and it was doing well. It was just performing. But if you don't draw Mr. Negative on turn 3 or 4, the deck just falls apart. And that's kind of the problem. If you don't draw Mr. Negative in those Negative Surfer decks, then you're playing a suboptimal Silver Surfer. Why would you do that when you can play one of the most consistent decks in the game? This Lockdown Surfer deck is so good. Yes, you can play Sera if you don't want Spider-Man. That's fine. But what Spider-Man does is it locks down a location on turn 5. You have Reach with Jeff, with obviously Silver Surfer and others. If you lock down a location with Spider-Man and you have another location with Goose, like, where does their Hulk go? Where does their big play go? They can't play there. They can't play there. You've probably stormed and juggernauted another location, so they can't play there. They just can't play. So Lockdown Surfer with the addition of Spider-Man becomes really effective at controlling the board state. That's why this deck is so good. So if you're looking to play a Silver Surfer base deck, okay, Negative is fine. Negative Surfer is fine. But we're not going to talk about that today. This is the one I think you should be playing because I think this is the one that's going to be more successful in Infinity Conquest. Now, we know everyone's kind of sick of High Evolutionary, but High Evolutionary as a archetype has actually come down quite a bit. It's less than 5% of the meta share right now. It used to be like 20%, okay? So guess what? I'm giving you permission to play High Evolutionary again, okay? Because, listen, you want to win games, you want to get into those Infinity Conquests, and High Evolutionary is still an excellent card. And this Toxic Evolution deck, I want to show you something different because this is low-key one of the highest win rate High Evolutionary decks that pretty much no one's playing. And I think that that's a damn shame because it's leaning on an element of High Evolutionary that people weren't really leaning on. It's Abomination. This was one of those cards that we really thought had potential. And for those that don't remember, Abomination gets -1 cost for every opponent with a negative afflicted power. I explain that kind of awkwardly, but you know what I mean. Long story short, Abomination can come down basically for free, right? You have the Hazmat, you have the Luke Cage, you have the Rogue, which is huge tech right now. Listen, there's Darkhawks everywhere right now. Darkhawk is everywhere, okay? Look at the first deck I talked about today. It's a Darkhawk-based deck. And so Rogue is getting some additional value. But most importantly, okay, you have the Cyclops. You have all these abilities that just negatively kind of drop down your opponent. Yeah, if they have Luke Cage, you lose. You retreat, walk away. But ultimately, like, this deck just absolutely slaps. You have the opportunity to even skip something like a turn 5, play a basically free Abomination, free She-Hulk, and then whatever the hell else you have. It's crazy what this deck can do from a power output perspective while also putting debuffs on your opponent. Hazmat's not to be played on turn 6. Hazmat's to be played early to get Abomination lower in cost. So it's a bit of a different Hazmat style play, but ultimately one of the highest win rates in High Evolutionary right now. Okay, not going to take long on this one. It's Sera Control. I mean, this has been one of the most tried, tested, and true packages in Marvel Snap for the longest time. What I will say, though, there is a bit of a switch up, if you wish. Still experimental. Not saying it's better yet. Sentinel out, Mirage in. So if you have Mirage, the additional scouting for Mirage is being preferred to some degree. But again, if you want to play something safer, as I talked about even on the Snapchat, right? Honestly, Sentinel is still a damn good card. But if you have Mirage, that's a good switch you can do. honestly, the deck just works well. And I think what is propping up the popularity of this deck and its ability to win games is you have the Enchantress, which is completely destroying the Darkhawk based packages, the Zabu based packages. You also are running Scarlet Witch, which counters a lot of the magic-based gameplay you're seeing right now. So there's a lot of options. This deck just performs really well. It's just that simple. The deck performs well. It doesn't really have bad matchups. It just puts up points. So if you're going into Conquest, this is one you can lean on. Iron Patriot is without question one of the top decks in Marvel Snap right now. Its win rate is hovering around 58%. And I gotta tell you, it takes coconuts. It takes coconuts to play Iron Lad with Ultron because, quite frankly, that is madness. But I understand, and let me explain why this deck is designed the way it is and why it performs so well. So essentially, a couple key parts here. It's Patriot. You probably understand how to play Patriot, but the key techs, okay? Invisible Woman is fantastic because Invisible Woman allows you to hide your Patriot and others behind it, and if they play Enchantress, which is super popular right now, Invisible Woman gets hit with the Enchantress, and your Patriot reveals and is totally fine. That is important. Your Patriot needs to be saved. Your Patriot Mystique need to be kind of held up. Like, they can't just die, right? So why is Iron Lad in this list? If you hit Ultron, is that bad? Well, it's because Iron Lad, first of all, you can play on turn 4 or 5 or whatever if Ultron's in your hand, right? No problem. You could gamble on if Ultron's in your deck, but that's your own damn fault. What Iron Lad really excels at is Ultron's in your hand and you don't have Patriot yet, or you don't have Blue Marvel, and you're taking that role. Iron Lad is also really good on turn 6 if you know Ultron is one of the last 2 cards in your deck, and that's what you need to close out a game. Again, you're gambling a little bit, but its ability to reach 1 draw into your deck on turn 6 can be valuable. So it takes practice playing Iron Lad in a deck like this, because you could literally brick your game if you play Iron Lad and hit Ultron on turn 4. So please be very aware of that. But Iron Lad lets you just dig deeper into your deck on turn 6. If you have Ultron in your hand already, it allows you to reach for that Blue Marvel, which then you can play again on turn 5, right? So Iron Lad is a very flexible card, not to mention if it hits something like a Brood or a Mr. Sinister, this is disgusting because you get the Iron Lad replicated for each of the replications, right? So that's why Iron Lad is so good in this deck, okay? Just bear in mind, it's risky sometimes, especially with Ultron. Regardless, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you'd like to support the series, hit the like button. I appreciate it, and we'll see you in that next Marvel Snap video.